Starting. Hello! Hello, friends! How are we all doing tonight? I'm Dr. Jordan Peterson. Clean your room. Also, I hate people who are different than me. Sorry, frog in my throat. Hello, friends. Welcome to Step Back Tonight, the weekly show that I do, where I speak with you for many hours, and we do stuff together. It's fun. Some weeks we watch old Step Back videos. Sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes we do other things, like I don't know, play video games, just hang out. And in the case of tonight, we're going to watch, or we're going to do, I think it's alternate history night, so we get to do some alt-hist scenarios. Random Geek says last week was fun. Well, that's good. I'm glad you had fun. I would be remiss if I didn't also point out, I'm just gonna get y'all a link here. Probably not great praxis for, like, you know, my for my YouTube career, but I want to shout out the fact that my friend, she was on the show earlier, Shannon Strucci, is doing a YouTube premiere right now. I'm going to give you the link for that. And basically, she's on this tabletop RPG actual play podcast that it's about superheroes, teenage superheroes, and quickly goes into weird body horror stuff. So I thought that she's doing a premiere of that video. It's like an hour long because she decided to animate the first episode of the podcast. So, you know, that's fun. And yeah, so if that is a thing you're interested in, I would definitely recommend you check it out. For those who want to stay here, though, I don't blame you, because that's what, you know, that's what I'm here for. Hello, Mr. Famous. Hello, Comrade Jeb. David's like, Tristan, please. Yes, what's up, David? Just gonna make my alternate history list here. To kind of marry the two ideas, I remembered that I killed this idea, but I had a novel that was going to be... I got yours written down. Don't worry, David. So I had an alternate history novel, or kind of thing, that I was going to write like way back in the day. That was back in, it was going to be like a NaNoWriMo thing, and it was going to be superheroes, but in a modern day present time where the Soviet Union never collapsed. I didn't really know what the story behind it was, but it was like a modern day Cold War, and that both the Soviets and the United States had superheroes, and they fought each other, and they fought over things. But the chapters were going to alternate between the different people's perspectives. I had no idea what that story would have gone with, but, you know, that was a novel I wanted to write probably about a decade ago. Never did, but, you know. That is, there are so many novels that have never been written. And what else should I talk about? You know, normally watch live streams. Oh my. All right, well, hello, Eli. Welcome to the stream. I hope you're having a good time. All right. So, let's see. What's some other stuff that I can talk about this week, because it's been a week. Yeah, I guess I should talk about everything that's like been public and announced and stuff like that. So I'm working on a Step Back video that should be out this week, inshallah. You know, it's filmed. I have done no editing, so it's gonna be a busy few days. But I'm hopefully going to get it out before the end of the week. That's my hope. And then I have another one that is in the They have another one that's in the that's in the can too that I'm getting to work on. So I got a busy schedule for the next couple weeks, and oh my, you guys have so many things to say. I do like Bernie's campaign slogan should be "Hindsight is 2020." That's a pretty good one. That's actually a really good one. Unfortunately, that's a little bit too. Sanders is a bit too diplomatic for that. He'd be too nice. But yeah, but I mean, the sentiment that, you know, hindsight is 2020. Mwah. It's perfect. Okay, so got a few questions from y'all. I have some other things that I'm working on. First of all, for the end of February, I'm going to be producing my first script for The Cold War, which is a new YouTube channel that Kings and Generals is starting. Let me see if I can get that for you, a link to this for you. So this is The Cold War. It's a new YouTube channel that's going to be, I would describe it as kind of like the Great War, but it's being done by the Great Kings and Generals people, and I am writing all of the scripts that have to do with the United States, which is a lot. So the first one of those scripts I have due for the end of February, so I'm also working on that. I'll show you guys the thing because it's pretty cool, and I'm pretty excited for it. So yeah, so much stuff is going on. I'm working on this series. I have 2 step back videos that are in mid-production, and then on top of that, I have some other things that are coming out over the next few months. So I'm pretty excited. This is not by the people who make the Great War. That's by a different German company. This is the Kings and Generals team is putting it together, but the idea is similar. To sort of cover the Cold War with a channel for, you know, to cover everything and make lots of Cold War videos. The set's really cool. I think I talked about it last week because it's now, it was a bit over a week ago when I made had the meeting and I found out about it. But yeah, it's gonna be really cool. What else have I not covered? I mean, we're gonna have to talk about the Sanders in the room at some point, but I think I'll wait until someone asks a question about it. All right. Thoughts on... All right. Argos wants to know thoughts on Trump's national emergency. The Great War is run by Swedes, not Germans. Oh, for some reason I thought it was run by Germans. Oh well, sorry. Post these links on your Facebook and Twitter, please. I will definitely post the first Cold War video that comes out on my. I'll post some links. I'll remind myself to post these links because I'm gonna forget if I don't. So I'll just do that. All right. All right. I'll post them on the link. I'll post these on my Twitter and my Facebook after the show's over. Because otherwise I won't remember them. All right. So, thoughts on Trump's national emergency. All I can say is wait till Thursday. That's basically what I'm working on next. You guys with your questions. What's the next thing? Thoughts on the Kama Sutra? Sure. It's historical text. I don't even know what to think about it. I haven't read it. But kind of cool, I guess. That's the Hindu sex book. Pretty neat that I live in a world where that's real, I guess. What if Japan attacked the USSR instead of the US? All right, we are going to get to that. Put that on the alternate history list. What do you think of the concept of labor vouchers? Do complex human societies need some kind of money analog to function? People who that's more of like a mutualist perspective. Honestly, I think that the idea of markets is a little problematic. It whenever you try to transition the use of a commodity in a tangible way where you can value one thing over others, things get complicated and basically result in a big what's it called? It results in inequality. It will always, because people will find exploits of the mistakes in how we value things. And so although I do think that labor vouchers are a decent idea, because the idea behind labor vouchers is basically it's like Marxist money, where you earn labor hours and an object's price would be based on how many labor hours it took to make said thing. The only thing that I would add to that is that that takes away the concept of from each according to their ability and to each according to their needs, because every society is going to have people who can't put in as many work hours as others. And so having a sort of labor voucher system still incentivizes people to work more time than they would otherwise be comfortable with. And then on top of that, the bigger thing is that labor vouchers would hurt people who have issues with working, either through various forms of disability or mental health issues or anything like that. And I think that a labor voucher system would still result in a lot of the same problems we have with the capitalist system due to that. And not to mention, unless you strictly regulated labor vouchers, you would still end up with weird schemes and investment and things like that that would probably turn it into something not dissimilar from a capitalist system. It's just that if you think about it, it's like a gold standard, except that the gold is a steady supply of human labor that increases by a set amount each day. Which means that if you want to increase the monetary supply, you have to make more people so that you can make more workers, which is not stable. Not yeah. Do I think it's better than why we have that we have now? Yes, but that's hardly high praise. All right. Argos wants to know, why'd you stream yesterday? I was bored. I was sitting at my computer watching YouTube videos, and I was just like, man, I wish I was doing something right now, but I was like, what do I want to do? It's like, I guess I want to play a game, but I am at a point right now in my video gaming where no game really speaks to me. And I've been wanting to crack open Undertale, but then I remember that Thought Slime said to me once that I would really like Undertale, and that it would be it would really scratch my pacifist itch. And so I was like, oh, well, if it's going to be about pacifism, I definitely need to do a YouTube video about it, because Undertale's also, it's a very memey video game. People talk about it quite a bit. And so if I played Undertale, people would want to watch. And I mean, you guys did, so it worked. So anytime I'm bored and I want to play Undertale, I'll probably stream it. How are we all doing? There's 36 of you here. Cool, cool, cool. Let's see. The portal of Gen Z. Love that. Yeah, I think it's true. For the sheer memeability, millennials got into Portal to the same extent that a lot of Gen Z people got into Undertale. And one of the things I think I said during the stream when I was playing Undertale was that game has a very peculiar relationship with the English language. And I was trying to pin down this is this kind of stilted language, this sort of the construction of Undertale's jokes in like all these small little ways, and the really like close attention to world building that is even in like a small amount of information. All that together made me think, and also like the promotion of like lateral thinking, all made me be like, oh, this reminds me of Portal. That's a random thought I was having today because the person who I share my office with is currently in Colombia. So I have the office all to myself, which means that I think weird things like how Portal is like Undertale. But also the fact that everyone freaked out about me eating the pie showed that like, oh, this is like when people were talking about the cake and stuff. And I don't know. My brain, when we were your age, we also got obsessed with dumb video games. That's all I'm saying. All right. So that's why I streamed yesterday. I'm currently working on a video if the USSR reorganized the Union of Sovereign States in 1992. Reorganized to the Union of Sovereign States in 1992. Okay, that's cool. What do we call the Russian army since the USSR is no more? I don't know what that question's about. I don't know what to call any of those things. What's next? Do you think we need a controversial left-tuber to boost left-tube's popularity and mainstream appearance? I sincerely hope not, but thinking about it, it's like, it probably wouldn't hurt, honestly. Did you just back in my day use? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, so... Okay. It's... You guys. Alright. Quite a few leftists that are showing... Wait, what's this? Quite a few leftists are showing their support for Bernie Sanders in 2020. I'm excited as well. What are your thoughts? Oh, some geek. Oh, some geek. Thank you for asking that question. I have been a fan of a certain senator from Vermont for a very, very long time. I realized today, almost a decade. You can see there's the Bernie Sanders action figure right there. And I think there's, yeah, if you guys look, there's also a Bernie Sanders button right there. So basically the story goes, I first found out about this man when I used to live in Quebec, which is a province in Canada that very closely borders Vermont, or at least the part that I lived in did. And so I lived very close to Vermont, and I knew a lot of people from Vermont. And this was when I was like, from like 2008 to 2010, I kind of took a break from following politics a whole lot. I got... I was in like a college program, and I was kind of just in my own place for a few years. Probably not the best mental place I've been. Probably, if I were to say, like, probably the time when I had the least amount of regular social contact was like 2008 to 2010. I spent a lot of time at home playing video games, and I spent a lot of time with my dog. Who actually passed away last weekend, sadly. And when I came back into politics, basically when I finished doing a general arts and science diploma and went to like real university and started doing my my history degree. And when I started following up, the first thing that was happening was the Bush tax cuts. So Bush put in a whole bunch of tax cuts for rich people that were expiring basically at the end of 2010, and the Democrats and Republicans were both fully on board to vote in to extend them and basically perpetuate the Republican tax cuts forever. This was like one of the first. This is 2010, so It's during Obama's administration, and so the Democrats controlled both House. Well, I think that it was maybe around 2010, so maybe it was right after the 2010 election. So this was a lame duck session of the 2008 blue wave that was just about to get replaced with the 2010 like Tea Party group. And so those tax cuts were going to expire, and it was going to get bipartisan support, except for one independent senator from Vermont who did a freaking 8-hour filibuster of the Bush tax cuts. And when I found out about this, I was like, holy shit, who is this independent senator who is like single-handedly trying to stop this like horrible tax cut that was basically ruining everything? It turned out it was Senator Bernie Sanders, and I was smoten. I was smoten ever since. And I think I like said in like 2010 or 2011 that Bernie Sanders should run for president. It would be pretty great. Then he did. And so I was like, I've always been like, a fan. And then in 2016, he actually did run for president, and I got super duper excited. And then I watched as the like Democrats basically used every dirty trick in the book to torpedo his campaign. And that freaking broke my brain. It devastated me. I was in a pretty bad place because watching the like one last hope for America to not turn into basically not collapse, fail miserably. And then I watched America in 2016 Pokemon go to the polls, and here we are. And so the last couple years, we're like, what? How long a years has it been? Has it been 3 years now, Kelly?
Couple of years from what?
Since 2016.
Yeah, that's how math works.
Yeah, I think it's been about 14 years in the last 3 years since 2016. So...
Sorry, there's a delay on the screen.
Yeah, so it's been 14 years in the last 3 years of just this Trump, like, hell world existence we've been in. And I always just think, like, oh man, if the Clinton machine had not just, like, stamped out Bernie Sanders, we would not be in this mess. And with Trump running for re-election, and I think I've said on multiple streams that the Democrats are basically having the war for the soul of their party right now. Basically, the 2020 primaries for the Democrats are a referendum on neoliberalism and whether the Democrats want to keep losing elections or if they want to finally win an election and finally turn the ship around and kind of go with go on the victorious route. Because right now their position on the failures of neoliberalism are to put their fingers in their ears and scream really loud that it's not happening. And so, except for Sanders. And so I think that even without him winning this primary, like even just participating in the last primary, he's already pushed open the Overton window in the Democratic Party so far that it's almost like in 2016, the position that public health care for the United States was considered unthinkable. And now it's almost required to the point where now you've got the pod people, all the Johns from Pod Save America writing these doing these long speeches about how Medicare for all can mean access to Medicare for some. Shows that like they have to say it now and like these things are really popular ideas, and just having that platform to give them air really turned things around. And also this is the 2020 is it the first election? I think it is the first presidential election where Gen Z and millennial voters outnumber Gen X and baby boomer voters. So these new ideas are finally going to come to fruit. And I think that if Sanders pulls this out and wins the primaries, that it's not even going to be a close contest. So to answer your question, what are some of my thoughts about Bernie Sanders running for president is that I knew it was going to happen. It was like a thing that everybody knew it was happening. But I wasn't anticipating to be as just as full of joy as I was when I saw the announcement, and about how this is good. This is like there's like this quote, I'm trying to remember, I think it's a Martin Luther King quote where there's like nothing more powerful than a good idea whose time has come. And his announcement, and when I found out that he has outraised Kamala Harris in like 4 hours, I think there's like something to be said that there is a sea change coming to America, and there's nothing more powerful than a good idea whose time has come. And to think about my nephew who lives in America being able to grow up without going into debt to go to university, and to not have to worry about paying doctor bills, and just to have more opportunities than his mom or his mom, my wife's sister, or even the baby boomer grandparents. Like, it's for him. It's for people like him. We like the fact that right now all I can see is this dark future for this like innocent kid who's going to grow up in a like not super duper well off, and is going to suffer the slings and arrows and just like the brutality of how dark America has become right now. To think that maybe we can turn this around is really powerful. And I think that we don't give that enough credence. And I feel very, very good about what's happening. Now, the slugfest will probably start in the summertime, but because I think the first debate is like in July, but this is good. The fact that Sanders is doing so well, the fact that now out of declared candidates, he is by a significant margin, like by over double all the other people who are polled. He is by over like by double digits the most popular candidate. Is huge. Is huge, huge, huge. So that's where I'm at. It was a good day. It was a very good day. Can you imagine a complex human society with nothing analogous to money? Yes. I think that we need to make said society like yesterday, because money and the concept of money is corrosive to the human psyche and destroys us. And I think that we could definitely have a economy based on the idea of, I am because you are, and to each according to their needs, from each according to their ability, and fully automated luxury gay space communism. I think all of those ideas are a great thing to strive towards. And I think that they are realistic. I think that they are much more stable and much more egalitarian than any system that has currency could possibly have. Because there's going to be, like, currency would be impossible to run without it being, without creating inequality. The entire concept of markets follows something called Zipf's law, which is that, like, a small amount of people will have the majority of all currency. This has been true through all of the history that we've had money. And if you have any market system, will follow that. And it is a unfair and unjust way to distribute wealth, and so we need to get rid of it. Cooper Beach, is Bernie Sanders enough? No, he's not. Bernie Sanders is the best candidate that is currently running for president, and probably the best candidate that could get elected president. Trust me, I would love President Antifa, but like, you know, we're still a little off from that. So I'll take social democrat. Thank you. America is in need of an actual left-wing party. For the first time, I don't think there's been a left-wing candidate in American history since like FDR, possibly, even though FDR was very much a liberal. Really, like, this is like once in a century type of political sea change. And so, yeah, I do think that would be, I think that, you know, I will be super duper happy to be the left-wing person criticizing President Bernie Sanders and saying that, you know, whatever, his healthcare plan doesn't go far enough, that this doesn't go far enough, and this doesn't go far enough. Because he's going to put in a healthcare plan that's not going to cover psychiatrists. It's not going to cover dentists. It's not going to cover orthodontists. So, like, even Canada doesn't cover those things. And I think that we, like, you just push for one thing and you keep pushing for better stuff. And this is like the first time that some of these like deeply rooted problems with America could actually have a real solution. It's pretty cool. Suppose there was no Bernie. Do you think the same thing would have happened to Warren in 2016? No, I don't think that she wouldn't have had the same magnet. I wouldn't say magnetism. That's kind of a rough thing to say about Sanders, but wouldn't have the same. Okay, the thing about Elizabeth Warren, I love Elizabeth Warren. I think she's great. I think that she's got some issues in the electability department, which we can talk about. But I think that she's more right than wrong on issues. I think that she's a little too right-wing for my taste. She's still a little right of center. She still doesn't declare herself to be a socialist. She's still very pro-capitalism. She is still fairly for a interventionist foreign policy. Still sees America as the indispensable nation, that kind of stuff. But you know, I would take Elizabeth Warren as a silver medal. But either way, that wasn't the question. If Elizabeth Warren ran in 2016, would she have gotten the same like Hillary Clinton like machine destroying her? And the answer is no, because she's not that will strong of a candidate. Like, she would have dropped out. Like, if Sanders hadn't have run, there would have been that one debate where Clinton scared away that man with no neck and that man with too much neck, and then she would have been the candidate, and there would have been no contest, because she's very much a beltway politician, and also is very she's very well known for not liking to campaign. Like, there's a reason why Elizabeth Warren's Senate seat is in Massachusetts, because it's a seat that is basically impossible to lose. And the reason is because she doesn't like running campaigns. Like, she when she was running her Senate campaign, she doesn't really get super involved. She doesn't do a whole lot of events. And also, she's fairly non-confrontational as a politician. I mean, she's confrontational with bankers. She's good at shit-talking like predatory lenders and stuff like that. But when it comes to the scrum of fighting your own political party, I mean, she has some people in the Democratic Party who don't like her, but she tries very hard to be a people pleaser, and so a lot of people sort of tolerate her, which like is fine as a senator. The fact that she is a like more left of center than normal senator who pushes for banking reforms in the Senate and is like a strong leader in that area, and on top of that is a good consensus builder within the Democratic Party machine, makes her an amazing senator. I think that she's perfect for the Senate. And I don't think that she would have wanted to offend Hillary Clinton enough, because she knows, like most of the Democrats knew at that time, that Hillary Clinton will fucking destroy you if you go against them. That the Clintons keep an enemies list, and they make sure that those people never see the inside of a congressional office again. And so she wouldn't have done that. The fact that she's running this time is probably due to the fact that people have been spending the last like 2 years like commanding her to run, and she's doing it. I see her as being pretty good to have on the thing. I don't anticipate she's going to pull huge numbers. I don't think she's going to last really long in the race once like the debates come down, because she's not really good at fighting with people in her own party. And I think that she'll probably only last a couple debates before she drops out. I think that what is more the case, and this is not a bad strategy, that Elizabeth Warren is running for president because if she drops out and has a pretty good performance though while she is doing stuff, like if she can take a state or if she can do really well in the debates, then if one of the right-wing leaders becomes, if one of the right-wing people gets to the finish line, she is a like perfect vice presidential candidate for them. Like if Harris or Booker or Gillibrand or what's that other right-wing Democrat that I can't remember the name of, who's like infamously hard to work with, that's like already gone through 3 campaign managers and she's like barely started. But either way, all those people would probably take someone like Elizabeth Warren as their vice president in order to shore up the Sanders vote. That's my thought. And so I think that like that's not a bad call for her, and I think that her being involved in presidential politics is a pretty good place to go. And as I said, if this is still February of 2019, so we've got a long way to go, but she's gonna have to find a way to differentiate herself in the debates somehow, and she's gonna have to. And if she doesn't drop out, and if she actually makes it to the end, she actually wins, she's going to have to fight Donald Trump, which will be fun to see because she fights with him on Twitter all the time. It'd be interesting to see that on the debate stage. But her winning would be, like, if Sanders gets knocked out of the race, she'd be my second pick, like, hands down. And I wouldn't even feel bad about it. I'd be perfectly happy if she was the presidential candidate. It would be like, less good than I would, but I'll take it. Bronze medal would be Tulsi Gabbard. 4th place probably be Kirsten Gillibrand. She's doing some pretty good stuff with talking about the Me Too movement, and the fact that she was able to shit talk Al Franken, which even though he's been marched out of the Democratic Party, the fact that she's like willing to stand up to people who are in her party. Last place, there hasn't been like a real gargoyle who ran for who's declared they're running for president, but Joe Biden really sucks. You want someone who's guaranteed to like have Trump gain like win like all of the houses of government all over again, it would be Joe Biden. Joe Biden would be a fucking Hindenburg of a candidate to go through. Kamala Harris, I wouldn't be super happy about, because like in this like Black Lives Matter moment, we need to be like seriously fighting the carceral state and dealing with private prisons and dealing with prison labor and all these things, like, and the new Jim Crow, which is a thing that she's has a long career of defending and upholding, which is like not super great for me. So that's my ranking so far. I don't know much about who else is even running for president. I don't even know. Who the hell is running for president? Howard Schultz would also really suck. That would be really dumb. Because Howard Schultz, I think, is like teasing at doing a second. Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar is the person I talked about who is like notorious. Like, she does. I know two things about her. One, she hates millennials, and two, that she's gone through three campaign managers already, and all of them have said that she's like one of the worst human beings to work with. Can I link you the Democratic candidate? I have a list here. You got Elizabeth Warren, be a silver medal. Cory Booker is, I don't know, he's like, he might have, like, he's been running, he's like one of those people who's been playing to run for president since like he was like 6. He's like Marco Rubio. He's like basically a thumb running for president. It's like, okay, you're there. You are this like perfectly spherical, no edges, no things that you can just kind of attach all of your hopes and dreams to. What? Okay, Pete Buttigieg? No, that's not even a real person. Oh my God, he is. Oh Jesus. Okay. Julian Castro. I forgot about or Julian Castro. Julian Castro. That's like an Obama guy, right? He's an Obama guy. I think that one of his things is that he had like the ultimate centrist thing to like combat the free college thing, where he went like, I will propose 2 years of free college, which is like, I just thought it was a really funny thing. But I haven't heard anything from Julian Castro since he announced, which makes me think that his campaign's pretty much dead in the water. Cory Booker's also running for re-election of a Senate seat. Yeah, that shows how much optimism he has in his chances. The thing about Cory Booker is that this is his first run for president, and also he's fairly young, and I think that people know that it's not his last run for president. He's going to be one of those perennial presidential candidates. Believe you me. You got Tulsi Gabbard, who is... She's good. She's, okay. She's got some serious, she's got like a lot of good and then like one or two really bad things. She's got some really gross stuff that I don't know where it comes from, but she's on the Foreign Policy Committee and is anti-imperialist, which I think is really good because, having a presidents, like foreign policy is one of the things that presidents actually get a lot of direct control over, and having a strictly anti-imperialist president would be pretty nice. Tulsi Gabbard also would, she's also fairly progressive. She's got a lot of progressive credentials. She endorsed Sanders in the 2016 election, actually gave up a very important position in the DCCC to do it. The only problem is that she's got just a couple things that are slightly problematic, like being linked to like Hindu nationalist groups in India and being friends with like borderline like fascist nationalists in India, and having reportedly less than good opinions about Muslims. But I don't know how much of that is like true or how much of that is like this like kind of thing. Like we have a Sikh Canadian running the left-wing party in Canada named Jagmeet Singh, and when he got the leadership of the New Democratic Party, the media went on this long blitz trying to connect him to like sort of the Tamil Tigers and like Sikh terrorism, which makes me think that like maybe that's the Tulsi Gabbard thing. But also I have friends who who follow Tulsi's campaign a lot closer than I do. And I think that in like my dream team White House, Tulsi Gabbard would be, she's my bronze medalist for the race, as far as that goes. But on top of that, she would be a good like Secretary of Defense for like a Sanders presidency, because Sanders is going to have a Secretary of Defense, and Tulsi Gabbard would be pretty high on the list for that. She's also not doing super great in the polls, which makes me think that she's probably also going to be an early dropper and probably support Sanders again. So, you know. Oh, and there's also the chance that Beto will run. Beto O'Rourke, who is the guy who ran a Senate campaign against Ted Cruz. Do a drunk stream. Maybe. That'd be fun. I feel like I shouldn't do that. I am an ass when I am drunk. So Beto ran a Senate campaign against Ted Cruz, and because Ted Cruz is actually a fucking goblin, even Beto O'Rourke could almost beat him in Texas. But he's a very right-wing Democrat who the right-wing Democrats are trying to coax into running for president because they want, there's not a lot of right-wing Democrats running anymore. There's a lot of them are centrists at best. They haven't had like that man with no neck who ran for one debate and bragged about how he killed somebody and then instantly quit. Which I think was like more, that was a real one. That was a real winner. I don't remember that guy's name, but he ran for president in the 2016 election. He showed up to a single debate, the October 2015 debate, and just like this question came up where they asked everybody, who do you consider your enemy? And like Hillary Clinton said the Republicans, and you know, Bernie Sanders said the billionaires and millionaires and billionaires. But then this guy said, mine was like this Viet Cong soldier who threw a grenade at me, and he's not around to say anything about me anymore. And had this like huge shit-eating grin, and it's like, oh god, this guy like basically bragged that he murdered somebody. God. And then the other guy, the other person, when there was 4 people running, like almost started crying on the debate stage because he got cornered making a super, super bad vote. And he tried to like weasel out, like he basically voted for the Iraq war, and he made some like weaselly excuse that like, oh, like, I just got the seat from my dad. And he just like got all flustered, and then they both dropped out. That was Lincoln Chafee. I will never forget Lincoln Chafee. As I said, the one with no neck and the one with too much neck. Michael Bloomberg is floated as someone to run, but like, okay, screw him. If the Democrats' idea for like becoming the presidential candidate is to just run another billionaire, like we'll have our billionaire beat your billionaire, but like, oh god. Or he does third party. There's like a couple people who are like self-made billionaires who want to run third-party candidates. Oh yeah, Jim Webb. Jim Webb is the Vietnam guy who like bragged that he killed somebody in a debate. So yeah, Michael Bloomberg would be a funny third-party candidate who would crash and burn terribly, I would hope. Sherrod Brown. I don't know anything about Sherrod Brown or Jay Inslee. And then there's still, I guess, like this is like finally dead, but there was a time when people were talking about Hillary Clinton running again. I think somebody said like, what is the worst possible choice to run? And that would have been Hillary Clinton running again. One of the worst decisions in human history. That would show that the Democrats learned absolutely nothing. And they were like, no, screw you. It's like when like a musician makes an album that like tanks hard, and they just keep playing it at all the concerts because you're like, no, it is the fans' fault for not appreciating this album. Sherrod Brown is an Ohioan senator. Oh, okay. I don't know too much about Sherrod Brown. Okay. Do you think people who work for organizations like the IMF and World Bank really believe in neoliberalism, or do you think they don't care? A lot of people in like things like that, like organizations like that, don't just get there by like, oh, this is just a job, stamping my way in and out. Like you'd have to be a bit of a believer. And while most neoliberals, except for some very, very, very normal people on Twitter, would not call themselves neoliberals, but it's what the ideas are collectively. Like, neoliberalism isn't so much an ideology that like people label themselves as, but it is a collection of beliefs that that liberalism has morphed into since the 1970s. Would Clinton be okay as a member of a Democratic administration? She already was. She was Secretary of State, and approved the summary execution of Osama bin Laden with no trial. So, I don't know. Take that how you will. Okay. Why do Americans believe in the Reconquista of America by Mexico? Because there was a lot of illegal immigration in America in like the 1990s that has since gone down significantly to the point where now it's a net negative. More people leave Mexico illegally. Or sorry, more people leave America illegally going to Mexico than the other way around, because things have gotten better in Mexico. Like, illegal immigration isn't really a thing that you can manage that way. It's sort of the factor of economics, and Mexico has been getting a lot better in the last couple decades, and so the illegal immigration has gone down. Honestly, if people wanted to seriously do something about illegal immigration, they would have helped bolster Mexico's economy so that people weren't so desperate and poor that they needed to risk their lives to go to the United States in order to just make money. But I don't know. It's a conservative, right-wing conservative fantasies about like brown people are coming to ruin something. It's a reactionary fairy tale. It's been around forever. If it wasn't, Mexicans coming from Mexico. Oh, Comrade Archer, thank you so much for the $3 super chat. If it wasn't, Mexicans, it was just immigrants in general. Now it's like terrorists. Now it's literally like merged into like Mexicans and people from the Middle East are coming up on their bus. But it's also been in the past. It's been black people who like, this is the same type of fear that people had of banning slavery. There's a lot of people who thought that if they got rid of slavery, that black people would just start moving into all of the states and ruining everything. And like, this is just like a common reactionary reaction. In 1993, a majority of Russian voters voted that they supported economic and social policies that have been conducted by Boris Yeltsin's administration. Why would they vote that way? They were super fucking sick of freaking Gorbachev's very bad handling of basically everything. Okay, let's see. Thoughts on Kamala Harris and what if she is elected as president? That would be disappointing. For all the stuff I said earlier about Black Lives Matter and the carceral state and the new Jim Crow. Read the book The New Jim Crow and realize that in California, she pushed for and advocated for a lot of those things. And that's basically why I would not be happy. Bill Weld is looking to run against Trump in the Republican primaries. Bill was Massachusetts governor and Libertarian vice presidential candidate. Well, that'd be fun. I'd love to see Trump get primaried. I don't think anybody in the actual party has much of a spine to do it, but Be fun to see. Who do you think would be a good vice president for Sanders? Tulsi Gabbard would be a pretty good one, because Tulsi Gabbard has more foreign policy experience and sort of that foreign policy angle that Sanders would be probably would be weaker on than, weaker than average on. That's one of his strengths that she could push on. Though she would really need to answer for all of this, like, Hindu nationalist stuff. I don't really know. I haven't really gotten to the bottom of that, so I don't really know how to approach that part. Who else would be good? Probably like someone like Elizabeth Warren would be kind of good, but like I feel like Elizabeth Warren as vice president is kind of a wasted potential, because she's very much like Sanders on a lot of things, but then like what would she contribute as vice president is a good question. I honestly think that Sanders being president and having Elizabeth Warren in the Senate to like push through these like major banking reforms would be really awesome. I think that would be a power duo. Make Elizabeth Warren Senate Majority Leader. That under Sanders as a president, and that you're gonna see some shit get done. I probably put Tulsi Gabbard at the top of the list. put Hillary Clinton. Oh God, have her be president or vice president every day. All she has to do is pick up her newspaper and see if Bernie's died yet. Because that's like 90% of the vice president's job is just like being a backup in case the president dies. It's not true. I kid. It varies president to president. Some presidents like FDR, his vice president didn't do dick all. But some vice presidents are very involved, and some, like Joe Biden, were kind of just kept away from the action in order to not embarrass themselves, because that man can't even eat ice cream without making a gaffe. So, what is that? Oh, okay. What if Leon Trotsky became the leader of Mexico? Oh, that's an alternate history. We should get to that soon. It's been an hour. Stacey Abrams. I don't know much about Stacey Abrams. I don't know who that is. I've heard the name, but I don't know much about her. I have to look her up. Or no, is Stacey a unisex name? Is Stacey a man? If it's, I don't know. My first instinct is that Stacey is a woman's name, but I think like Shannon, it's sort of a unisex name. Though I don't think there are very many men named Stacey. What would a young person, i.e. like Black Phantom 929, considering joining the U.S. military because they think it's the best way to have access to things like university? I mean, he's not wrong. The ethics of being in the military are not something I can tell you to decide. I could not imagine being in a desperate enough financial situation where my choice is between becoming a part of an imperial war machine for a couple years in order to be able to afford education, but I've never been in that situation, so I can't really say. I think it's really unfortunate that he's forced to do that, and we really shouldn't live in a world where he does. So I think he said on the Discord that he's like 16. So 2020, maybe we can try and see if we can get, sometime before 2022, a free university thing passed so that he doesn't have to join the military. That's another example of like how a Sanders presidency would make like direct positive changes to people that we know right now, is that people wouldn't have to join the military and get themselves killed or maimed in order to get a university education. That would be super great. But I can't make decisions like that for people. That is a personal decision you have to make on your own. You think that Comrade Jeb is like, can Hillary Clinton be in cabinet again? I don't think she would volunteer for it, to be honest. I don't think that she would. Hillary Clinton would not accept Bernie Sanders asking her to be like Secretary of State again or something like that. She would be okay at that job because she has all the relationships in place. But because she's like been a Secretary of State before, so she knows a lot of the people. But I would think that would be bad politics on Sanders' part, and she would not accept it because I imagine she is still super mad that Bernie Sanders dared interrupt her coronation. Or just the fact that he represents everything that she doesn't. Yeah. Okay. NAFTA helped Mexico then. Well, David, NAFTA helped parts of Mexico. NAFTA did do a lot to grow Mexico's economy, especially its telecommunications and manufacturing sector. But it also did some pretty terrible things to other parts of Mexico, like the utter destruction of the indigenous corn industry, because America subsidizes its corn, and so flooded the Mexican market with cheap American corn, which basically drove a whole bunch of people who had been farming corn whose like families have been farming corn for thousands of years, drove them bankrupt. That wasn't good. So the impact, like all neoliberal things, has been slightly positive, but also drastically unequal, and to be honest, for the working class, a slight decrease. So for Mexico's professional class, for Mexico's upper class, NAFTA's been great. For Mexico's working class, especially its landed farmers, has been fucking shitty. But like in other parts of Mexico, like there's a lot more like manufacturing of cars because Mexico has universal health care, so it's actually cheaper to hire Mexican workers in a car manufactory than like say America and Canada, even because Canada has a higher minimum wage than America. Well, actually that's not true in a lot of cases now, but Canada used to have a higher minimum wage, but also they didn't have to pay health insurance for them, so it was cheaper to make like Ford plants in like southern Ontario than say like Detroit. So if you're wondering where all of the cars are coming from, they're coming from Mexico and Canada, specifically because America doesn't have healthcare. Because I don't know about Mexican manufacturers, but Canadian manufacturers are unionized, and also like get paid a lot more in proportion than American workers do, but you don't have to pay health insurance. So it's way cheaper to just hire Canadians. And so, you know, you want to save some manufacturing, just ask any small business how expensive it is to buy health insurance for your employees, and then how much productivity gets lost when you have sick employees. And you'll see that universal health care will definitely help the American economy. But that was a different question. NAFTA was a really big deal and really complicated. And so the effect it had on Mexico was huge and complicated. Hazma Ajmal. Aren't most illegal immigrants from Central America? Mexicans aren't really coming here in big numbers. Yeah, that's true. Most of the people who tried to make it to America are escaping drug violence in Central America. And are applying for political asylum, which, you know, if America was run by a normal person, wouldn't have been a problem, because America, as a signatory to the Geneva Accords, is required to take people who request asylum as part of, you know, refugees. Something we signed because the last time, before World War II, there were a bunch of Jewish refugees who went all around the world trying to find a place to that would take them, and everybody turned them down, except Mexico. Thank you, Mexico. And yeah, and a lot of them got sent back to Germany, where they were then killed in a genocide of the Jewish people in Germany. And so after the war, we signed these like international agreements that said, you know, refugees have rights. And then Trump just said, actually, nah. Okay. But yeah, like, illegal immigration on America's southern border is not even a thing anymore. Or if it is, it's in such small numbers that it's nothing. It's a manufactured controversy made to spark racism. I'll talk a little bit more on Thursday when I make my quick step about Trump's emergency power stuff and the wall. So, the Muslim guy who was executed without an imam being present. Doesn't matter if death row inmates are having their rights violated, if being on death row is in itself a rights violation. Yes. Those are two separate issues, but a prisoner's freedom of religion should be sacrosanct. They are guaranteed under the First Amendment of the Constitution. The fact that a Muslim American being executed was denied his First Amendment rights to his religion is fairly cruel, and it was terrible. The fact that he was executed, also bad, also terrible. But those are two different issues. I think they're both. When will the alternate history begin? Soon. I have one last question, and then we're moving on to the alternate history. So, thoughts on Jason Unruhe? He bad. That's that, he's like a tanky who has a YouTube channel, but he, like, is, like, super tanky, and, like, I hear he has not so great opinions about trans people and all that kind of stuff. I don't know too much about him, but I also know that Thought Slime is a pretty good judge of character, and Thought Slime is not a fan. Oh no. Did a question? Talk about the troubles in Northern Ireland. I want to know your opinion on paramilitaries and politics. Honestly, 1 through 8, I don't really know that much about Irish history, so I can't really speak to it anyway. I'm sure I'll probably end up, if the UK goes through quote-unquote hard Brexit, we'll probably have a chat about the troubles. I'll probably do a video about it or something. Okay. Let's do some alternate history, friends. Let's go to another timeline. Thoughts on the gamer question? Oh, God. Oh, no. All right. So this first one comes from David Chipman, really good local fan, Toronto fan. Nice to see you. Nice to see you in the chat a few times. Russian Revolution is won by the White Russians. I could go for a White Russian right now. Be terrible for my throat because both alcohol and milk are bad for when you're doing a lot of speaking, and a White Russian has both. So let's talk about... Okay. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, Russian Revolution, big Russian, so like what we call a Russian Revolution, where, you know, the Tsarist forces, or the Tsar was killed by the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, and then the Bolsheviks killed the Mensheviks, and then the Bolsheviks killed the anarchists, and then the Bolsheviks killed the left-wing communists, and then the Bolsheviks killed everybody else. And then Stalin came to power, and then Stalin killed all the old Bolsheviks. Yeah, Eastern European history. It has a certain flavor to it. But during the Russian Revolution, there was a Russian Civil War, basically, that lasted until 1924, against basically between the Red Russians, basically like the communist forces, and the White Russians, which were those who supported, originally, I guess in some parts they would have supported the monarchy, so I guess they probably would have tried to find another Romanov to come back and be the king, the Tsar of Russia. But honestly, from what I remember, the White Russians were mostly people who supported the provisional government that existed. So like, all right, let's do some Russian history here. the is it Tsar with a Z or Tsar with a C or a T? That is an example of when you translate something from a different alphabet, then you get weird things. You thought the whites wanted democracy. Kind of. Let's talk about it. I do like that one, yeah. Tsar is spelled Tczsar. That is the correct spelling. That is a Step Back History canon now. That Tsar is spelled Tzzsar. So the White Russians. So during like the during the Russian Civil War, as some people would call it, there were some who were monarchists, although most were supporters of the provisional government, because in the months leading up to the Russian Revolution, there was the Tsar, Nicholas II, stepped down from power, and after he stepped down from power, he put in a provisional government, which was sort of this fairly weak but still existent sort of liberal government. And the idea was that Russia would become basically like a constitutional monarchy. And I mean, the Bolsheviks weren't super big fans of democracy, so that didn't really matter to them. And they were also revolutionary, freaking, what's it called? Blanquists, basically. So they basically wiped out that government. And during until 1924, the Nikolai, not Nicholas, you're right, it's Nikolai. The parliament, all right, so the thing, though, is that the White Russians also got a lot of clandestine support from the West. This is a front of the Russian Civil War that we don't talk about very much, where the United States and Britain and those are the two that come to mind immediately. They both gave both materiel and people to fight against the communists. I think it's the only time in history where you actually had American and Soviet troops fighting each other. Okay, yeah, Japan too. Okay. And so, yeah, that war happened, but then they eventually lost. The first thing we need to think of is how do we get a White Russian victory? Let's see. Well, the White Russians, I don't exactly... Okay, my knowledge of Russian history is not great. That's why in the Cold War video series, I am writing the American side. The White Russians would have... Germany wins World War I and invades Russia to save the Whites. Yeah, but I feel like that would be more of a generic Germany winning World War I scenario, which is that has more impact on history than I think the Whites winning the Russian Civil War. But I think that I want a story where World War I goes the same way, but Russia doesn't become the Soviet Union. So the Bolsheviks get taken out. Now, how would you do that? The Bolsheviks had more support of like the general populace, and the White Russians had more support of like foreign powers. So there would be, you'd have to have, I think as Comrade Jeb is kind of hinting at with the Japan intervening fully, you'd have to have the foreign powers that are trying to set up this puppet government more invested. Maybe even officially getting involved in a huge capacity, which would be a really tough sell directly after World War I, or in some cases, during World War I, and also during the Spanish flu, which was killing more people than died in the entirety of World War I. this thing is we don't talk about very much is that in 1919 and in late 1918 there was a fucking global pandemic that wiped out more people than the entirety of World War One, which was like more or less on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. Yeah, maybe so. Germany gets a little bit of saving in the Versailles Treaty so that they can turn and kind of push on the Russians. You'd have to have the Red Russians lose a lot of conflicts. Maybe, let's go super black and red here and go. Yeah, the Poles defeat the Russians in 1920, and so they get pushed back from that. They push into Poland. Maybe you'd have the Ukrainians under Nestor Makhno have a little bit of a stronger pull. And so Nestor Makhno's anarchist forces, which were hunted down by the Bolsheviks as well, maybe they fight back in a stronger way and push sort of defeat the White Russians there, but also fight the Soviets. And I think that if you were to end up with a White Russian victory in the Russian Civil War, you would probably end up with a much diminished Russia, because the popular support of the people of Russia was very much on the side of the Bolsheviks. And so I feel like the only stable White Russian victory would be this sort of form of minority rule, which, that has happened many times in history, where you would have the foreign powers install you wouldn't be able to have elections because the elections, they would just vote in the communists. So it would have to be like this sort of military dictatorship run by a pro-capitalist White Russian general of some kind, and would, through extremely brutal repression, probably just terribly massacre Russian people as they kept trying to resist White Russian oppression of the popular will, which to me would have a couple of things. It would be there would be a lot of problems with maintaining control. I feel like a military dictator in Russia would probably have taken a different tack with a couple things. So make peace with Germany and continue the war. Savvy popular opinion. Okay. Post-Napoleon France thing. I think that this minority rule military dictatorship would be a very unstable government, which would probably mean that they would be figuring out what to do after the war. You don't have the Soviet planned economy, so you don't have the massive economic growth that happened in France in Russia. You don't have the massive economic growth that happened in Russia in the 1920s and the 1930s, which means that the Great Depression basically the Great Depression hits Russia like a ton of bricks. And then you would probably have a lot of Bolshevik 2 radicals. But also I could see that if the Soviet experiment didn't catch on and didn't take off the ground, that leftism in general and communist groups would be kind of demoralized. So they wouldn't be as strong, which makes me think that you might end up in a situation where with a military dictatorship, in order to maintain the population and get them to be on their side, that they would become, in the 30s and stuff like that, more nationalistic. Without the threat of Soviet communism, though, you wouldn't really have the uptick in fascism as an idea, because fascism only really came to power, if you think about it, because they were able to convince liberals and centrists that fascism was the only appropriate way to deal with the left. They were scared of the Soviets. They were scared of socialists and communists in their midst. And so a lot of these fascists, like I'm not even, you just call everyone you disagree with a fascist. Like I'm talking about like the literal Nazi party and like the literal fascist party of Italy, won over like powerful capitalist leaders, like basically the centrists and the conservatives and the liberals of their countries, by saying that they needed fascism in order to defeat communism. And so without the Soviet Union scaring the fucking bejesus out of the rich people in Europe, you wouldn't have fascism on the rise. So then fascism came to power entirely through coups, though? Not necessarily. Many times the coups were not like they after the war, a lot of people tried to say that they were coups, but really the fascists takeover of Italy was done by the fact that the king of Italy supported Mussolini more than he supported his own government. And with the help of the capitalists who funded, a bunch of French capitalists basically funded the fascist newspaper in Italy that led to Mussolini getting popular. But you hadn't thought of those things, David. Interesting. It's cool. So without the capitalists funding the fascist movement in Italy, they wouldn't have got as popular. But also, the brown shirts would not have, It's funny because like Mussolini is the example of this what I'm learning about called red browning, which is interesting. Because he was he was a socialist who became a fascist after he became like disillusioned with socialism. And so, yeah, he would rig the system. He gained power, and eventually he made a deal with conservative factions in the Italian government to just be leader. Like, it was an agreement between like the elected leadership of Italy and the Italian king. And they sort of made a deal that put Mussolini in power, thinking that they could use his popularity in order to get the country under control and to deal with communism, but that they could control him. And then eventually, when he got into that system, he started usurping the power from all of these different sources. Luckily, he had the full-throated support of the Catholic Church, and he had the full-throated support of the King of Italy. And so, with those two things, he got pretty popular. Germany was Hitler in Germany was elected, but he did not have enough votes to become like the leader of the country, and so he also made a deal with conservative forces in Germany who thought pretty much the same thing, that they could use his popularity in order to defeat the communists, but they thought that they could control him, and then eventually he just centralized power and took them over and burned down the Reichstag, and basically everything went down. And so, yeah, there would not be a fascist movement. You would probably still see, or at least not fascism in the way that we would see it. You'd probably still see you'd probably see another like period like the 19th century, where in the 19th century there's a lot of up and down economic times, and you'd probably see like rising nationalism and rising communist like socialist movements, but nothing as organized as like you saw in the lead up to World War II. So what you might see is more nationalist stuff and socialist stuff entering into these governments in a more organic fashion or through protests. And so what you might see, instead of like a big-ass World War II, is a lot more internal instability, as these ideas haven't gone away, but they don't have enough gas under them in order to make Europe explode like it did. Because you probably would never see communists or fascists 100% taking over. The only Yeah, because like every single one of them was done with Soviet or communist help, and so the you would see a much less, like a World War II time period that has less violence but a lot more instability, which I think means that the sort of crumbling of colonialism and stuff like that would also be slower and maybe much less successful. And so it'd just be kind of like a period. I don't know, you'd like after that point it would be hard to describe what happens after that point, because then that's down to like, does any movement form? Does a socialist movement gain wheels and get big? And I do think that like in the Depression, fascism or communism were bound to happen somewhere, because the Depression was so bad economically that somewhere it was bound to happen. And so does a country like the United States or France become communist because they don't have the Red Scare to suppress communism, like suppress communist groups? Like the Red Scare in the Palmer raids in like the 1919 and 1920, where they deported and suppressed a whole lot of left-wing activism in America. Like that stuff wouldn't happen because the fear of Sovietism would be gone. And so you'd probably have a lot more powerful left-wing movement in a lot of countries. Does one of those get big enough to overthrow a country? Maybe. Does a nationalist movement get big enough to overthrow a government and, put in fascism? Maybe less so, unless it's a reactionary thing to the other thing I talked about. The Soviet Union was a big deal because it scared a lot of the world. Because there had always been socialists. There had always been angry socialists protesting and pushing for things around the globe. But it was the Soviet Union, a country where communists took over the government, that was a really big deal. That made a lot more people scared of what communists could accomplish. All right. That went in a lot of cool places, but I hope David, you had an entertaining time with that discussion. I know that World War II and communism is pretty popular with this group, so it doesn't surprise me. What if the movements of the late 60s and early 70s were successful? Are you talking about like the flower power, like the hippies and stuff like that? Yeah. Okay, so like if, say, the problem is that they kind of were successful. It's just that the like hippie movement they just grew up and became rich and then abandoned all their principles. That's what really happened. But let's see. Let's see what we can do to get a left-wing success, a more baby boomer, left of center idea, a hippie generation candidate winning. I have an easy one to go with, and that would be, let's say Robert Kennedy doesn't get killed. So for anyone who doesn't know, and then in the 60s, in the mid to late 60s, Robert Kennedy, so JFK's brother, was Bobby Kennedy, was a front-runner for the Democratic primaries, and partway through the primary season, he was assassinated. And then the Democrats put up a super shitty candidate because LBJ had announced he wasn't running for another term, and the crappy Democratic. Let's look up who it was in the 1964 election, or 1964, 1968, 1968 election. 1964 was Barry Goldwater. So, yeah, he was the most popular. It'd be like if during the 2008 primaries, Obama got shot. And then Hillary Clinton ran for president against John McCain. And John McCain would have won probably or something. So instead of So instead of RFK, they got Hubert Humphrey. And Hubert Humphrey did not beat Nixon for president, and Nixon became president. So, easy alternate history scenario here. Robert Kennedy doesn't get shot. Easy. Yeah, 1968, like, it would have been pretty easy in 1968 to be convinced that the entire United States was collapsing. There was a lot of bad stuff going on in 1968. I should probably do a video just about 1968, because that was quite a year for America. Anyways, so RFK, who was the fan of the flower power hippies, the anti-war movement, and also a friend of the civil rights movement. I think he was even a friend of Martin Luther King before he died. I believe by 1968 he was dead. So yeah, RFK, President Kennedy 2, Electric Boogaloo. And this is considered a massive victory for these young baby boomers who have all these radical ideas of love and free love and Beatles and stuff. And Richard Nixon hated all those hippies. But RFK was their friend, and so RFK probably let's make him the dream president. Okay, MLK was killed in 1968, so yeah, like I said, 1968, rough year. There were like race riots across the United States. It was a huge year. So RFK becomes president, and he is the best of both worlds. He is everything we could have hoped for. So he is this progressive, civil rights friendly, civil rights friendly, anti-war like guy. He believes in the Great Society, believes in making it stronger, but also he is not going to be the cold warrior his brother was, and he is going to go with the people who got him elected, and he's going to say, you know what, we're getting out of Vietnam, and America leaves Vietnam before, like, let's just say by 1970. So like 8 years before the Vietnam War ends in our timeline. That would make RFK possibly the greatest president ever to end a major war and also keep the Great Society going. Because Richard Nixon was not great as far as those things. Now, there was a bunch of stuff that Richard Nixon did in the early 70s that I imagine baby boomers would get on board with, if at this age anyway. Today, they would be like, destroy all things. I think that like the baby boomers heard about how the mythology about how the Egyptian pharaohs would be buried with all of their servants, and like the baby boomers took that literally, and now they want to like take the entire earth and all of the younger generations with them when they die, so they just destroy the whole environment and wreck the whole economy, and then just die and leave us all to just like suffer. There's a great meme I posted on Twitter that had like this thing from The Simpsons where it showed that Mr. Burns' plan was that Smithers would be buried alive with him when he dies, and it just had the coffin with like this plastic Burns getting buried, and Smithers just like at the bottom, and basically that is what would happen. That's what's happening to us, but just we are Smithers, and the baby boomers are Burns. These streams are always so cheerful. Thank you, Terry. I try. But let's say we get our dream. Let's say we get our ultimate Robert Kennedy dream, and we get out of Vietnam, and could we go back a ways and talk about the Revolutionary War? I'm just going with what people ask me. So let's see, early 70s. So Clean Water Act, more or less had bipartisan support, I'm pretty sure. Endangered Species Act, also more or less had unanimous support. Those were both pretty bipartisan bills, if I remember correctly. Nixon put those through, but I can see those going through. Robert Kennedy does a tearful. All right, 1969. Freaking Buzz Aldrin and Louis Armstrong and Neil Armstrong go on the moon. And Robert Kennedy harkens back to in this tearful speech about his brother and how his brother believed in this mission and like Apollo 11, and it's all like really big for him. Does America end up like? The thing is, like, Nixon was responsible for like détente, for like cooling the fight with the Soviet Union. Does RFK do that? I don't know. Like, Brezhnev is the person in charge of the Soviet Union at this point, and Brezhnev was a little more like hardline compared to Khrushchev. I mean, Khrushchev was quite a cold warrior, but Brezhnev was a little bit more like. Actually, sorry, Brezhnev was more like. But the joke is, Brezhnev had very thick eyebrows. Anyways. So, do Brezhnev and Robert Kennedy... Does RFK pass UBI? I don't think so, actually, 255, because at this point, UBI was actually a Republican idea. The thing about UBI and it was first pitched as something called a negative income tax, and it was proposed by the Chicago School of Economics, which was in the late 60s, early 70s, was making inroads in the Democratic Party with some people, but after the Barry Goldwater election, we're starting to switch over to the Republicans, and so with RFK. Brezhnev was a drunk and loved giving medals to himself. Yep. What a guy. Yeah, so RFK, let's just say détente happens. I think that'd be pretty cool. And the neocons and the neoliberals sort of move over to the Republican Party even faster. And so, let's see, 8 years... So 8 years after an RFK president would have you get to 1976. 1976, sorry. So 1976 election, 8 years of RFK. Do we have Richard Nixon run for president again? He'd be pretty old by that point. Maybe he wouldn't. But also, who else would rise in the party? Because you wouldn't really have the Ronald Reagan people kind of power, because they kind of needed Nixon. Like, a lot of Ronald Reagan's cabinet were former Nixon people, and they sort of needed the establishment of Nixon in order to really take over the Republican Party. Because Nixon, even though he was the last liberal Republican, he was pretty after Watergate and stuff like that. That was when the neocons really took over the party. But we're having that happening earlier, so we could say that freaking Richard Nixon runs. Let's do something really weird and cool. Let's have Richard Nixon run for president with Ronald Reagan as his vice president. Let's have the fucking vampire duo get elected in 1976. And it's kind of like a mirror. It's turning into a mirror. They have a one-term presidency that because RFK put in a whole bunch of social programs that people like, the Republicans basically try to dismantle it, and that is really unpopular. And after 4 years, the Nixon-Reagan administration just gets tossed out on their asses super early. They're what's it called? Nixon becomes a one-term president. And in 1980, another Democrat gets elected. Let's say, since I'm not an expert on 1970s and early 1980s Democratic Party politics, let's just go with the person who was president in 1976, which was Jimmy Carter. Nixon did open the way that money influences politics. That's true. And yeah, the Iran crisis. So, maybe Nixon. Nixon sends the CIA to get the Iranian. So like Iran has its revolution in 1979. He did run. Yeah, Carter was running for a second term. So 1979, the Iranian Revolution happens. They capture the American. They get American people together, the American hostages, and the Republicans drag their feet and don't act. And when they do, they send the CIA. And instead of getting themselves killed, or instead of getting them out, they get a lot of the hostages killed, and also the CIA agents. And it's very public, and the entire world is super embarrassed about it. So that's one of the things that blows up in the face of the Republicans, that the Republicans are inept at foreign policy, trying to reignite the Cold War, trying to intervening with other countries in a way that people don't really get. You have like Iran-Contra type stuff happening, but like it doesn't get buried like it was in the 80s. And then the Democrats come back with Jimmy Carter. And basically what happens is that when Ronald Reagan and Nixon's presidency just collapses, it's sort of like the death of the neoconservative movement. I'm turning this into my dream scenario now. So Jimmy Carter becomes president in 1980, and he continues on the legacy of Robert Kennedy. Comrade Jeb, you are amazing. Yes. All right. Instead of Jimmy Carter, Ted Kennedy runs for president, and Ted Kennedy becomes president. And Ted Kennedy is like president from 1980 to 1988. And instead of, so we have JFK in the 60s, RFK in the 70s, and then you get Ted Kennedy in the 80s. America is Kennedy crazy. And after getting a third Kennedy, the Jeb of the Kennedys, I think you would agree, Comrade Jeb, he's okay. He's an okay president. Let's just say that. He's like, he follows what RFK was into, but not as full-throated. It's the 80s. People are wearing big shoulder pads and getting more conservative, but it's not as bad. Like the Cold War doesn't reignite. So maybe détente keeps going, because you have 8 years of a Democratic president to like sort of calm down the war rhetoric. And yeah, maybe, okay. Mehmed77 makes a good point. Maybe in this part, one of the campaign things that happens, like in the 1984 election, is that the Republicans are like, "What is this? A House of Kennedy? Like, is this a kingdom now?" Like, that's the campaign. That's the campaign they're going with. That's what the Republicans try. It fails because Americans love Kennedys, and Watergate never happened, so people are less cynical about politics than they are today. But if the U.S. seems soft when the USSR nuked them, no, the USSR was plenty good at feeling paranoid about the United States without them being belligerent. Not to mention in the 80s, the USSR was going to be tied down in the war in Afghanistan, so that would have put them down. You think HW could have beat Ted? HW couldn't even win presidency on his own. He basically won on Ronald Reagan's energy. But let's just say that Ted Kennedy gets the same sort of reverence that Ronald Reagan gets, because he was president in the 80s when things were good. the digital revolution was happening, and so computers were making things, like economy was growing fast, and so everyone talks about how great Ted Kennedy was. The Soviet Union probably still collapses. That had very little to do with America. But let's just say it. Let's give Kennedy let's give Reagan a little gold star and say that the Soviet Union collapses in 1992 instead of 1991. You get one more year. You get one more year sticking together because of the Soviet Union. Maybe the SALT treaties might go better. Ronald Reagan had all these anti-ballistic missile treaties with the Soviet Union kind of fall apart. And so let's say the Soviet Union is able to sort of keep its economy on life support a little bit longer because it doesn't have to invest as much in nuclear weapons development, even though, of course, they secretly are still doing it. Joe Biden, 1988. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So Joe Biden, who ran for president in 1988, that was the year Tristan was born. How many alternate history scenarios do you have to get to after this one? A lot. There's 19, so a lot. I never finish these. I always just go until I run out of time and then stop. So we're having. Aren't we having fun? Aren't we having fun? I feel like it's okay. We don't have to get to all of them. We'll be all right. You can make your own alternate history scenarios. I'm just some dude on the internet. I'm just speculating. Yeah. So, but I honestly I'm thinking this is I like this because you have no America fucking with Afghanistan, which means there's no Osama bin Laden, there's no Taliban, there's no Al Qaeda, there's no 9/11, which means the 2000s are completely different. The Republicans might come back in the 90s with something. So maybe 1988, you get Joe Biden with a one-term presidency, but then early 90s, something's got to happen. The law of gravity is that the Republicans pick up somebody. Maybe we get President Newt Gingrich in 1992. Oh. And this is where America finally gets to have its relationship with stupid neocon stuff and Newton Gingrich. Does he go with his campaign promise of going to the moon and making it the 51st state? Ooh. It says Clinton wins 1996-2004. Bob Kerrey? Who's Bob Kerrey? You mean John Kerry? Is it John Kerry 2004 to 2012 and Obama 2012 to 2020 and Sanders from 2020 onwards? Oh yeah. President Gingrich sounds like Hell World. Yes. Not only because Gingrich is like Trump, but also a giant nerd. He writes alternate history fiction and he writes science fiction and stuff. So Newt Gingrich is the nerdiest president. And in the 90s, when in the 90s it's cool. He's a nerd, but Microsoft is happening and Windows and the internet. And so everyone's because I think Newt Gingrich got interviewed on Wired magazine at one point in the 90s. So he's the pro-business, pro-American business. I'm the internet president. And he's the gamer president. And everyone loves him for that. Even though Newt Gingrich is a he is another goblin. Who did I call a goblin earlier in the stream? Kelly, do you remember? She'll get it in a second. The delay takes a bit.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I called somebody a goblin earlier. I think Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz I called a goblin. Yes. Ted Cruz and Newt Gingrich are more similar than they are different. Al Gore versus Newt Gingrich for internet president. Yes. That's the 1996 election. It's Al Gore versus Newt Gingrich. And they both invent Bitcoin. They invent rival cryptocurrencies against each other. No, you need the technology in the 90s wasn't there for Bitcoin, sadly. But let's just say that, like, yeah, 1992 to 2000, Newt Gingrich is president. And then 2000, you have Gore versus... You wouldn't have George Bush Jr., because George Bush Jr. needs his dad to get into politics. Newt coin and Al coin. I don't know. This, like, 90s Republican internet presidency. John McCain? John McCain would be a pretty good person to follow up. Yeah, let's do that. So it's John McCain versus Al Gore. I would say Al Gore would win that. You have the 2000s. Al Gore takes climate change seriously because he's Al Gore, so of course he would. So Al Gore does, he solves climate change in the 2000s. So the 2000s are great. There's no 9/11. We're solving climate change. We have internet. Newt Gingrich starts a Web 2.0 startup called N.WT, and it's basically the replacement for Twitter. That's the new Twitter. It's called Newt, and it starts in 2003 instead of 2008. And it's just called N.WT. Everyone loves it. Friggin' Newt becomes a, like, Silicon Valley trillionaire or something, and then he starts a publicly or a privately funded space program to get himself to the moon. And that's how he lives out the rest of his life. He lives on a moon base. Now that we're going into complete goofy territory. Because he doesn't want to live on the same planet as President Al Gore, who has solved climate change. Because, like, Newt loved climate change. It's his favorite. So there you go. That was fun. That was that made me see that there was an alternate history where things were, like, legit better. You don't know? Just noodle it. Noodle. Oh man, Noodle. That's like the new Google. That's great. That's great. Newt Gingrich becomes the ultimate tech daddy. And yes, of course, you get President Jeb from 2024. What if Nixon was never president? Well, we basically did that. If Japan did not hit Pearl Harbor, America doesn't enter the... I'll just do some quick ones. So that everyone's happy. What if Japan did not get Pearl Harbor? Japan would have gotten out of the war pretty fast because no oil. I think when Japan surrendered to the United States, they were 6 days away from basically having no more petrol left in their reserves. So they would not have been able to fund the war machine anyway. They had no gasoline. They had, like, used all of it up because they basically had a surplus, or they bought a bunch from the United States, and the United States embargoed it, and that's why they did Pearl Harbor. They thought that they could push the United States out of the war, or from getting involved, and sort of intimidate them into getting rid of the embargo on oil exports. And so, yeah, Japan attacked America for oil. So basically, America was Japan's Iraq. But obviously that didn't end well for them. Didn't end well for America either. Funny that. But America probably would have found some other excuse to get involved in the war. I don't know what it would have been, though. The Soviet Union would have definitely gained ground in World War II. What if Japan attacked the USSR instead of the US? I don't even know what they would attack. I will never be happy until you give me all your attention. Oh boy. Don't know how to respond to that one. Okay. What if the Strozovoy mutiny had succeeded and there was a true communist revolution in the USSR? Oh man, that would have been rough. I don't even know. All right. Argos Panoptes. What if Iraq had been to America like America had been to Japan entirely? Oh boy. Like Iraq nukes America? Holy crap. Yeah, Japan fighting the Soviet Union would have been weird because the Soviet Union's border in Asia was like Siberia. Like it was not really hospitable territory. It would have been a weird war because like Russia would have been fighting at the very end of a very, very long supply chain. But the Soviets are also like ridiculously determined people. So they probably would have found a way. Even if they had to pick up all the factories brick by brick and move them down the railroad and rebuild them in Asia, because they did that during World War II. So, oh boy. What if Scandinavia is still Nordic and did not adopt Christianity? Varg would not be oppressed then. That's a fun story. I don't know. I don't know too much about Norse history or Scandinavian history. It'd be cool. I imagine that the Norse religion would have been reformed quite a bit in order to stay relevant in the modern age. Probably would have canonical texts. Might be reinterpreted to be a little less brutal over time. What if World War I didn't start in 1914 in our timeline? Franz Ferdinand wasn't killed. I still think that World War I would have started in a different flashpoint. World War I was sort of the spark that happened on top of a pile of dynamite. And without the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, there probably would have been another diplomatic incident that would have set it off. There was some false starts to World War I that happened before the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. Like there was one in Greece, if I remember, between Britain and the Ottoman Empire. But like they just have another kind of nationalist flash up that would have that probably would have set off World War I, maybe a little bit later. What if Deng Xiaoping and his faction had never come to power and the Communist Party or the I don't know. I don't know shit about China. Sorry. What if Lenin was never born? There probably would have still been another socialist leader. There was a lot of socialists, and there was a lot of popularity for socialism. Lenin was a very good leader, a very charismatic leader, but I'm sure somebody else could have picked it up. What if Victoria Woodhull became president? Even if she had won all the votes, she probably wouldn't have been allowed to become president because she was legally not allowed to be president at that point. Well, there's a loophole, right? Because Victoria Woodhull was a woman who ran for president in the late 19th century under the socialist ticket or something like that, and there was like a law where women couldn't vote, but it didn't say anything that women couldn't run for president. And so she ran for president, got like no votes, but still, that'd be neat. So, how does she even win? That's the question. How does she win? How does she get the votes? Because like the closest thing the only thing I can think of that would make Victoria Woodhull president of the United States would be like that kind of it feels like that moment in The Simpsons where it's like where Homer becomes a boxer and he is going to fight Drederick Tatum, who's basically Mike Tyson, and he basically is like, all right, the only way that you're going to win is you have to visualize how you're going to defeat him. And he just goes, congenital birth defect, a congenital heart defect killed him moments before he stepped into the ring. Because yeah, that like 19th century, that would be a time where American politics was super corrupt. Like people like flat out bought votes back then. And so like I feel like even if she got the most amount of votes and won the Electoral College, even that like Tammany Hall wouldn't have it. They wouldn't let it. They wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't accept it. They would have a constitutional crisis over it. They would freak out. What if Michael Dukakis won in 1988? All right, so that's 31 years ago now. I know, because 1988 was the year that Tristan was born. So let's see what Michael Dukakis platformed on. Is Michael Dukakis still alive, or is he dead? He's still alive. He's 85. Good job, Michael Dukakis. So, traditional liberal positions on issues, calling him a card-carrying member of the ACLU. I loved how that was a way to hurt his position. All right. Dukakis's general election campaign was subject to several criticisms and gaffes, such as capital punishment, Pledge of Allegiance in schools, and photographs of Dukakis in a tank. Yeah, that picture of Dukakis is ridiculous. I'm looking for Dukakis's platform. He lost the election against George H.W. Bush, though, like, really bad. Dukakis had trouble with the personality he projected to the voting public. His reserved and stoic nature was easily interpreted to be a lack of passion. Dukakis was often referred to as Zorba the Clerk. Okay. Nevertheless, Dukakis is considered to have done well in the first presidential debate with George Bush. But in the second debate, his performance was poor, and he played to his reputation of being cold. Wow, versus George H.W. Bush? That's quite an accomplishment. Dukakis's mental health became an issue when he refused to release his full medical history, and there were, according to the New York Times, persistent suggestions that he had undergone psychiatric treatment in the past. Oh my. Okay, let me find the Dukakis tank picture, because this was hilarious. He looked ridiculous. Tank. It's like the #2 search result you get when you look for him. Look him up. Michael Dukakis, ridiculous looking. Copy image address. So there's a picture of that's a picture of Michael Dukakis, just to show what we're working with here. Yeah, I'm trying to find his platform though for presidency. He must have had one. Michael Dukakis, 1988 presidential campaign, Democratic primaries, Massachusetts miracle, running mate selection, acceptance of the nomination, TV advertising, Donna Brazile resignation. What? Donna Brazile was involved with this? She was the field director of Dukakis's campaign. Really? I did not know Donna Brazile was that old. Donna Brazile is an extremely strange person who has a dog with like a name like Mr. Wigglebutt or something like that. She has an entire book that is a whole trip. Wow. She's also the person who, worked for CNN and gave Hillary Clinton the questions in advance. So that was cool. I cannot find Dukakis's platform at all. That's weird. Wait, let's... He should have just had his health was auto... Okay. What was his platform? What did he want to do? All right. Dukakis's platform. He opposed capital punishment. All right. I'm with him so far. Supported unsupervised weekend leave for first-degree murderers serving life without parole. Okay, these are the things that H.W. Bush had used against him. So he supported furlough. All right. Soft on crime. I like it. Also, he's a card-carrying member of the American Civil Liberties Union. All right. So you would see a real reversal of the sort of idea in the early 90s of like the, what's it called? Tough on crime was kind of like the word on the street in the 90s. So Dukakis being president would probably have turned that around a bit. Oppose the development of cruise missiles and see the thing about Dukakis is that Dukakis was the person they pulled up after Reagan had been president for 8 years. He was like the last left-wing Democrat. Like after Dukakis lost, that was when a lot of the Democrats were like, oh, in order to beat the Republicans, we just have to become right-wing. Those were the New Democrats, as they were called. And that was basically like Bill Clinton and Bill Clinton's kind of cohort. That has kind of been the right-wing Democratic Party has kind of been the the standard until today. So Dukakis winning would change Democratic Party politics quite a bit. Be great to see. So he opposes increasing the size of the military. That's what Strom Thurmond didn't like about him, and whatever Strom Thurmond doesn't like has to be good. Except Strom Thurmond was friends with Joe Biden. That's a thing that Joe Biden doesn't say very much, is that he eulogized pro-segregation Republican Strom Thurmond. Joe Biden, the gifts just keep coming. Yeah, every page of his personal history shows just how much of a disaster him running for president will be if somebody even does like Oppo research with like Wikipedia. Oh man. Opposed the invasion of Grenada. Failed to timely support anti-terrorist military action in Libya. Dude, this guy rules. Opposes U.S. efforts to keep open sea lanes in the Persian Gulf. Okay. So basically doesn't want to invade Iraq. That's what that means. Opposes aid to freedom fighters in Nicaragua and Angola. Holy fuck. This is... Oh my god. By freedom fighters in Nicaragua, they are referring to death squads. So they're referring to like the Contras versus the Sandinista movement. So this was David Broder of the Washington Post in 1988. So by saying opposes aid to freedom fighters in Nicaragua, it means that they were making it a point against him that he was against supporting death squads. Holy hachi machi. Oppose sending U.S. troops to Honduras in response to Nicaraguan invasion. Stated that the Monroe Doctrine has been superseded. Dude, Michael Dukakis sounds like the best president ever. Holy crap. Active participant in liberal nuclear freeze movement in the early 80s. Okay. Reagan was kind of part of that, so failed to support any effort in the last 8 years to resist Soviet aggression or communist expansion. Okay, David Broder, whatever you say, bud. Michael Dukakis also said, I've never done drugs, but I certainly understand why some people try it. Okay. Michael Dukakis is 85 years old. Can we have him run for president again? There you go. There's my 2020 pick, guys. Michael Dukakis 2020. I know it's a long shot. CNN does not give him good numbers. But if we can get Michael Dukakis to be president of the United States, I feel like we could get this whole thing in the bag. He opposed death squads in Nicaragua, which is better than most politicians can say. Dies first day. Yeah, he would only be like what? If he's 85 now, that means he would only be 90 years old when he finishes his first term. Oh my god. Dukakis. God, that would be like just a blast from the past. That'd be like if like the Republicans pulled out like Strom Thurmond to run for president. That'd be weird. Except Strom Thurmond is dead. He, like all evil people, lived a very, very long time. He died at like 97. He died at 97, and when he was 97, still believed in segregation. Hung on to that one right to the bitter end. And Joe Biden eulogized his funeral. Huh. The more you know. Vetoed mandatory sentencing for major drug dealers in 1978, so he's against the drug war. Opposes the death penalty for drug kingpins. Okay. Allows first-time drug offenders to go free on probation. Wow, we were fucking ghouls back then. Allows drug dealers to receive weekend furloughs in Massachusetts. Double the number of furloughs for drug offenders during his second term as governor. By the way, for anybody who doesn't know, furloughs are when like when they let somebody out of prison for like a few days. Usually it's for like something really important, like a funeral for a family member or something like that. Those are furloughs. It's not just like weekend vacation. Sometimes it can be, but for the most part, they're very rare, and they're used for like family events like weddings and funerals and stuff like that. And if you are not considered a flight risk, they'll let you out, and you just have to self-surrender again. Kitty Dukakis stated the United States should weigh legalizing certain drugs. Heaven be. Man, these arguments against Dukakis are so... Oh, he opposes prayer in school, friends. There you go. That was a thing. There you go. Man, we had such dumb political issues back then. Supports allowing... Oh, guys. Supports allowing homosexual couples to adopt children. And supports abortion on demand. And supports amending the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to include special rights for gay men and lesbians. Well, there you go. Can we just can we just have Dukakis forever? I love this man. What is he doing? Does he have a Twitter? I need to find out if Michael Dukakis has a Twitter. All right. He probably doesn't because he's 85 years old, but I need to know. Okay. Wait. Oh my god. Is this really it? Oh, god damn it. No, it's just the Dukakis library. The Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy. That's not fun at all. Alright. So, yeah. Robo Dukakis 2020 to forever. Oh, man. We were doing alternate history with him, so if he became president, America would rule, and he'd be president today. He would just be president forever. We would just be like, you know what? We're done. We're done looking for presidents. We found the best one. We got him. We got him in the bag. There you go. Dukakis is done. The 90s is made up of the Dukakis imperial presidency for all time, and America becomes the raddest, hippiest place ever. And the United States and the Soviet Union bury the hatchet. What's it called? Gorbachev and Dukakis become best friends. What was Dukakis' platform? Apparently it was just all awesome stuff all the time. I was just reading people attacking Dukakis. It was not even his own platform. You know what? Yeah, everybody else is planning on running for president in 2020. Why can't Michael Dukakis? He has experience. He already ran for president once. But he sounds imaginably unelectable. Oh yeah, he is totally unelectable in 1988. Nobody would have voted for him. I think in the 1988 election, he carried 4 states. Let me just... yeah, he sounds like he was way ahead of his time because he got 111 electoral votes. He won nothing. Let's see. What states did he win? He won Washington and Oregon, Wisconsin, that state that's north of Illinois, which I think is also Wisconsin. Wisconsin and Minnesota, and then Iowa. Okay, he won West Virginia, and New York, and Massachusetts, and nothing else. Didn't even win Vermont. He had 45% of the popular vote. Man, that's not even bad. Oh, New York and Hawaii. He got Hawaii? Oh, he did get Hawaii. Oh, there you go. Electability is a farce and courtesy has no meaning. Yeah, definitely the idea of electability is exaggerated. I think in America, 40-something% of Americans will vote for whoever is on the ticket on their party. The idea, I think that there is a vast overestimation of how many swing voters there are. But, yeah. and Dukakis losing the 1988 election was basically where the Democrats were like, we're going to have to become really bigoted and terrible if we're going to win elections. And so you're like, what is the most bigoted and terrible guy that we can get to run for president? Double points if he also has serially committed adultery on his wife and possibly sexual assault. And they're like, well, we got this guy named Bill Clinton. And they're like, excellent. Go with him. Because in the 90s, you could just get away with that shit. I mean, today you can get away with that shit. Like, we have, like, maybe a year and a half where you can't get away with that shit. Because men are the fucking worst in every way. And Bill Clinton is, like, the epitome of everything that is wrong with men. I don't know why I veered in that direction, but I'm not wrong. Some numbers of West Virginians voted against him in the Electoral College for Lloyd Bentsen, his vice president. That's awesome. So there's some people who didn't like him, but they liked his vice presidential candidate. Who? Dan Quayle. Oh my God. Dan Quayle, the vice president for HW, looks like he was grown in a vat that makes, like, politicians, or he was designed by an AI. Like, you know those, like, deep fake, like, pictures of people? He looks like a deep fake if you fed every politician into it. And that would look like Dan Quayle. So who was the vice president for Dukakis? Lloyd Bentsen. Who is this guy? Oh, he was the Secretary of the Treasury under Bill Clinton. Okay. But Tristan, Bill Clinton didn't have sexual relations with that woman, though. Oh, boy. You would socialize medicine glitch 42? I agree. I think that we could do that. Yeah. I can't believe all those rumors about Mignogna were true. I don't know. What are you talking about, Dan? I don't know. All right. So that was my Dukakis bit. It was not a great alternate history, but it was a great exploration of this awesome person who apparently ran for president. That's our secret anime president. Oh, that's the other thing is that Dukakis on his platform wanted to make anime real, which, like, that changes the whole game. Do a video on Dukakis. Yeah, I'll do it like who's I'll do a Dukakis video, and it'll be like one of Dan Olson's videos where he just, like, sees a movie and reflects on it. It's just me talking about how great Michael Dukakis is. All right, Comrade Jeb. What if oh wait, I think I deleted one. What if the Catalina International Airport support and/or management survived until today? What? All right, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. Basically, the Democrats were like, we put forward an awesome guy, better default to a centrist next time. Well, no, the thing about, all right, so I joke, but basically the way that the Democrats thought is that they were really scared of this concept of the Reagan Democrat, which was that they thought that the Democrats had moved too far left with Jimmy Carter and with the candidates they were pushing in the 80s, and that labor, like organized labor, like unions and stuff like that, were taking over the Democratic Party, and people were worried that basically the Democrats had shifted to the left too much, and it was making what were called Reagan Democrats, which were basically center-right Democrats, switch their vote to Ronald Reagan. And the Democrats were still trying to figure out what their post-losing the South civil rights map to victory was going to be like, because they'd only really had one president since LBJ. And so they were like, all right, if we're going to have to change our tack if we're going to win, because, you know, we got to either appeal to new areas or we're going to figure something out because they don't have the South anymore. And so one of the things they did is they basically said, all right, we gotta get rid of labor's stranglehold of the party and cozy up with finance. And they sort of pushed the sort of bougie northeastern elite out of the Republican Party and into the Democratic Party. And so they started becoming more business friendly and more, they're going to be like, they're trying to appeal to people who were right wing, but still be like sort of just a little bit to the left of the Republicans. And that won. I mean, I don't know if it won. I don't know if Clinton won the election or if Bush lost the election, but it got Clinton the presidency, and then they sort of, they basically tore out their own spine in order to win that election, or at least what they think they won the election. It's more that Bush lost the election. And then the Clinton campaign sort of just, the Clinton model of like, let's abandon all of our, let's like go like tack far right in order to appeal to these like mythical center right voters that will vote for the Democrats. And that's been their strategy for the last 30 years. And ever since then, they have steadily lost their control over large parts of the United States to the point where now the Democratic Party has less, at least as of 2016, they might have gained some back because of Trump basically ruining the Republicans' reputation. But the Democrats on the long scale have been losing seats at all branches of government at all levels since the early 2000s, basically. And they've never really gained it back in any meaningful way because the neoliberal turn that they took in the 90s doesn't really do much. And so, yeah, that's where we're at. But it was the Dukakis election. It was Dukakis losing in 1988 that basically made the Democrats go through that shift. Just like how losing in 2008 made the Republicans turn into fascists, basically. They were like, we need to double down on this racism thing. That's how we're going to win. Because I remember the Republicans were walking into the 2016 election thinking, all right, our new strategy, we're going to switch. Like, people were talking about this. I remember this in like the 2012 election. I was in an American politics class, and people were talking about like, all right, like Hispanic people are typically fairly conservative, and they are a large and growing population in the United States. And like, if we can just win them over, then the Republicans would be able to have a new stronghold, because if they can make inroads with the Latin community, then they would be they'd be golden. And that was their plan. That was their plan for the 2016 election. That's why they ran Jeb, and also why they ran candidates like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. This was their attempt to try and get the Republican Party out of the, they were trying to put the immigration stuff behind them and try to be like, no, we will welcome, like, welcome Hispanic people into the party and try and reach out to that community. That was their plan, because a lot of their southern strongholds like Texas and stuff like that were starting to buckle under demographic shifts. And then Trump showed up and been like, Mexico doesn't send their best, they're rapists and all that kind of shit. And that just like completely destroyed that plan. But yeah, that was actually the idea going into 2016. That's why they had those people. All right. We covered the World War I one. My throat's getting a little sore. What if gamers were not obsessed and were allowed to say the N-word? Oh my god. Argos, come on. What if communism in Canada? Oh man, Sirloin. Now that's a fun one. I'm trying to think when Canada would have had a communist revolution. communism in Canada it has a strange and long history because communist movements in Canada have never really been super duper strong. When they have been strong, they've made inroads in certain provinces. The thing about Canada you have to know is that Canada's a very decentralized country. Check your Twitter. Michael for president. Michael Dukakis for U.S. president 2020. God damn it, it was the 80s Bernie Sanders. And cool, too. But no, you had to vote for Mr. 9/11, Daddy. Look what happened. Oh, that is a good one. That is a good one. Oh, man. All right. So, Canada is a very... there's a thing in Canadian politics that there's like this that Canada's secretly a one-party state, and it's a Liberal Party. And communist movements in Canada have never really sparked in a big way, except in places that were very remote. And even then, they'd be like linked to just like one area. Like, because Canada's a confederacy, which means that each province pretty much manages itself, and the federal government's actually pretty small. So like there was some places where communism was kind of successful, like Saskatchewan, for example. Saskatchewan is a province that is primarily made up of farmers, and until fairly recently, all of the farmers sold their wheat to a single government organization called the Wheat Board that sold their wheat on the international market and like controlled prices. To this day, in Saskatchewan, the largest company is a co-op, literally called the Co-op. On top of that, in Saskatchewan, they have one telecommunications company, only one, and it's called SaskTel, and it's run by the government, or at least it was. I think it's been privatized. So like, that's basically communist. Like, Saskatchewan was basically communist, and I think that Canada could have done more of those, maybe. I think that Canada could have completely turned communist, and nobody would have noticed, because we'd have just been like, oh yeah. I mean, we only have one gas station, but it's run by the government. But that's okay. Nobody seems to bother us all that much. We're good. So, like, isn't the U.S. a confederacy technically, since states have their own laws? To an extent. The thing about the difference between Canada and the United States is that the federal government in America has a lot more power and has a lot more resources than, say, a province. Like, the thing about Canada is, like, literally, with the exception of a few small things, like the federal government manages like international relations, the military, and like highways, and like that's it. and in the Arctic territories. And so like I could totally see. I think that if Canada were to become communist, it would be like it would just be like elected. It would just be like a few NDP governments that just nationalized a few industries, and nobody would have noticed. People would have come up to Canada and been like, "Oh yeah, it's a socialist utopia now. We built a colony around Jupiter last year, but we thought that we would just keep that to ourselves since nobody seemed to ask us about it, eh?" And like, because like no one pays attention to our country. It's like not a huge country on the world stage. So, yeah. We just had a few NDP governments who probably would have ended up with something very similar to Saskatchewan just across the entire country. It would have been kind of fun. But honestly, it wouldn't have had a big impact on the world stage. Things would have been a lot better for Canadians. I'm sure my life would have been a lot better, but dare to dream. What if the anarcho-communists won the Spanish Civil War? That would not have survived long. I think that if the anarcho-communists had gotten big enough that they were fighting, that they were like successful, like the thing about the anarcho-communists is that they were put down by both the Soviets and the fascists. So if they had won the war, they would have had to defeat both of those sides, which meant that they would have had not many friends come World War II time. Canada punches way above its weight on the world stage, though. That's true. Let's see. I thought Yeltsin's reforms were skyrocketing poverty in the 1993. That is true. Yeltsin was not good for America. What if Michael Dukakis became the Canadian Prime Minister in the 1990s? I like the way you think, Jeb. I see where this is going. I see that we are going full meme circle now. All right. What if Leon Trotsky became the leader of Mexico? Oh, man. I hate to say these things because I know that everybody wants certain things to happen, but if Trotsky became the leader of Mexico, the United States would have invaded Mexico, or they would have assassinated him, instead of waiting for Stalin to do it for them. They would not have allowed Mexico to be communist. America would not let that happen. They would go to war with Mexico before they let it become communist. Suppose something wiped out everyone in Europe 1,000 years ago. Where do you think the Industrial Revolution would have happened if Europe is off the table? China. China. They have the resources. They have the people. They had the technology. If there was no Europe, they would have had it. It probably wouldn't have even happened all that much later than in our timeline. China would have been China in at the dawn of the 15th century. So in the 1400s. You could have flipped a coin. China was a far more sophisticated and technologically advanced society than Europe. I would even argue at the dawn of the dawn of the 14th century and 1300, the Middle East was more technologically advanced than Europe. Colonization is really what put Europe where it is. No matter what's his face, whatever the guy who wrote that terrible Guns, Germs, and Steel says. Does China have a bunch of coal? Yes, it does. China has more coal than a lot of people. China's got coal. China's got steel. China's got rare metals. India wasn't unified, and especially without Europe, there would have been no unified India. So, yeah, Ming Dynasty. Or not Ming Dynasty. Ming Dynasty would have probably collapsed still. Qing Dynasty? I'm trying to remember who follows the Ming Dynasty. Why don't you like Guns, Germs, and Steel? Because it is what is called... It is a example of a scientist coming into history and thinking that he has solved all of the problems that historians have talked about for ages, and gets a whole lot, makes these sweeping... makes these sweeping theoretical connections across vast amounts of history, ignoring culture, ignoring the colonial mindset and all these other things, to sort of make European colonization look like it was some sort of unfortunate accident due to geography, when it was not that way. The thing about Guns, Germs, and Steel is that it doesn't factor in that, the way that he writes about it is that a lot of the world, he was trying to solve, why are some parts of the world poorer than others? And he's like, oh, it's because of geography. And it's no, it's because a lot of the world was fucked over by the part of the world that does have money. When he talks about how, Mexico is behind because they didn't have beasts of burden, it's Mexico was just fine. The Americas were just fine. It was, if you... A better book than Guns, Germs, and Steel that covers the same subject is called 1491 by Charles C. Mann. And everybody should read that book because it fucking rules. And it talks about how the Americas, if you look at modern archaeology, the Americas were way more technologically advanced than we like to think. And that the the relationship they had with their environment and their concept of ecology was eons beyond what the Europeans could consider. And the fact that they were basically like geoengineering large parts of the continent in order to serve themselves shows that they were onto some pretty cool stuff. It just is that the Europeans came and basically annihilated an entire continent, like a fifth of the human population. And that what Jared Diamond thinks is like geographical destiny was not necessarily true. There's some evidence that like Mexicans were not too far away from figuring out how to make steam do stuff. There's some other, and that like their metalworking was getting a lot more sophisticated near the end of their before the conquest, and so really, what we can like the things that Jared Diamond thinks are like these geographical destinies are not really, and the reason why Europe took over the world is not because of geography as much as it is about something called the colonial mindset, which is talked about a lot, but not by Jared Diamond, about how Europe had a culture that is that comes from the Christian tradition. It comes from the feudal tradition, that they believed in their right to conquer and expand into other people's land. There's a lot of good writing to show that Christianity as a religion is a particularly imperial religion, because not many other religions, Islam kind of comes close, but not really. Christianity, compared to other religions, is much more focused on expansion and conquest than other major faiths. And a lot of people think that the Christian mindset of like saving the world and converting people and growing the religion on top of things like the wars that feudalism created sort of merged to create this mindset that they needed to just conquer and expand. And that is that idea that you need to constantly be growing, you need to constantly be destroying, you need to constantly be incorporating more into yourself is a European concept. And that And this is why if you ever play a Paradox game for more than like 100 years, the world makes no sense because they programmed a lot of the countries in those games to act like Europeans with the colonial mindset. And all of a sudden you see all these weird things happening, which would never have happened because really Europe was the only continent that had this idea. And so what a historian would argue is the reason why Europeans have everything and the rest of the world seems to lag behind is that the Europeans showed up and took it. Yeah, that would be where I would go there. 1491 doesn't get into that, but 1491 is a really great case study to show that what we think about the world, what we think about the New World is so different than what we're taught. Or what we know about the New World now is so different than what you learned in school. It is a great book. I made a video about it. I made a video that's basically like a short summary of it. Doesn't do it justice. You should read the whole book. But if you want like a brief video I made that does a little bit on this subject, then I'll get that for you. Let's find it. Yes, here it is. Of course, it is my most popular video. How could I forget? So this is the video I'm talking about. Guns, Germs, and Steel talks about how it's not a fixed destiny and could have turned out different. It was just slightly more likely with the distribution than it was in Europe or Asia. Yeah, I do think from what I remember reading the book, he grossly overestimated what he grossly overestimated what he thought was or the role that ecology plays. All right. Oh my. It's a neighbor's dog. I haven't heard a pupper outside in ages. A pupper or a doggo. That was for Kelly. Where were we? What if Gamergate never happened? That is a great last scenario for us to do. Trump would not be president. That's a hot take. That's a hot take, but I honestly believe that Gamergate was the first thing that normalized blatant bigotry in internet spaces, but also in public culture. Gamergate gave a platform to open misogyny and the harassment tactics that basically allowed for the alt-right to become normalized and organized. And I think that without that, you might not have a Trump presidency. There you go. Because Gamergate was, Gamergate was bad. All right, so that was all the alternate history scenarios. We actually got through them, surprisingly. It's either the Manchu or the King. Okay, I think Michael Collins is like several minutes behind. If Gamergate didn't happen, we wouldn't live in a society. That is true. All right, friends, we're getting near the end of the night. My throat is super sore. I've been streaming 2 nights in a row. I am going to call it a night. But you guys have been super duper duper great. Next week, we'll be back and we'll do another thing. And hopefully you guys will all join me because I love doing these. So, everybody, take care of yourselves and